Imagine a war so vast, so influential, that it formed the very bedrock of Western literature. A 10-year conflict sparked by forbidden love, led by power-hungry kings, and colored by the interference of the gods of Olympus. We are talking about the Trojan War. For centuries, the story of the fall of Troy was considered mere fable. But behind the poetic epic verses, is there a trace of a real conflict that we can scientifically prove? Today, we will journey through time, from the ancient texts of Homer to modern excavation sites in Turkey. We will dissect the myths, analyze the archaeological evidence, and dig into academic journals to find the truth behind the legend of the wooden horse. Prepare for a story far more complex and fascinating than you ever thought. Our primary source is the epic poems attributed to Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which are estimated to have been written down in the 8th century BC, though they are based on a much older oral tradition. The Iliad is not the complete story of the war. It only covers about 51 days in the 10th year of the siege, with its main focus on the wrath of Achilles after his dispute with King Agamemnon. Other crucial parts come from the epic cycle, a series of poems that are now mostly lost. But they provide details about events before and after the Iliad, including the story of the Trojan horse, which was later recounted by Virgil in the Aeneid. It's important to underline that while these are our narrative sources, historians categorize them as mythology with a historical kernel. These texts are a reflection of the culture, religion, and worldview of Mycenaean Greek society and later periods. The mythological trigger for the war is a classic, the wedding feast of Peleus and Thetis, where the uninvited goddess Eris discord through a golden apple. The decision of Paris, a Trojan prince, to give the apple to Aphrodite, who promised him the most beautiful woman, Helen, was the beginning of the catastrophe. Helen's abduction or elopement from her husband, Menelaus, the king of Sparta, violated the sacred law of Xenia hospitality, and the oath of Tyndareus, where all of Helen's suitors swore to defend her marriage. This turned a personal conflict into a military obligation for all the Greek Achaean kings, led by Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae. However, modern historians suspect the real motives were likely economic and political. Troy was located in a highly strategic position near the Dardanelles Strait Hellespont, a vital gateway to the Black Sea. Controlling this strait meant controlling lucrative trade routes. The 10-year war was dominated by duels and grand battles. On the Trojan side, there was Hector, the guardian star of the city, a flawless hero. On the Greek side, there was Achilles, the greatest warrior, accompanied by his cousin and closest friend, Patroclus. The climax of the Iliad is Achilles' vengeful fight against Hector after Hector killed Patroclus. The defeat and death of Hector marked a moral and strategic devastation for Troy, even though their walls still stood firm. Achilles himself was eventually killed by an arrow shot by Paris, guided by Apollo, which struck his heel, his only weak spot. These stories are not just about battles, but also about the heroic code, arrate and inevitable fate. The gods actively intervened, showcasing the ancient worldview where nature and divine destiny were tightly interwoven with human fate. After 10 years of stalemate, the winner was decided by cunning, not strength. Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, devised the strategy of the wooden horse. The giant horse was positioned as an offering to the goddess Athena. After the Greeks had seemingly given up, this story was supported by Sinon, a Greek spy who convinced the Trojans. Stern warnings from Laocoon and his daughter Cassandra were ignored. Laocoon was even killed by 2 sea serpents, an omen misinterpreted as the god's wrath against him. Under the cover of darkness, Troy, lost in celebration, was destroyed from within. Virgil describes this horrific destruction in detail in the Aeneid, telling how the Greek soldiers leaped out, opened the gates, and burned the city. The truth of the Trojan War shifted from fiction to fact in the 19th century. Heinrich Schliemann, a businessman and amateur archaeologist, was determined to find Troy and succeeded in excavating the hill of Hisarlik in northwestern Turkey in the 1870s. At Hisarlik, the ruins of a stacked city were discovered, indicating 9 settlement periods: Troy I to Troy X. The layer most likely connected to Homer's war is Troy via. Why Troy via first? The timing. This layer is dated to around 1250 to 1150 BC, fitting the historical estimate of the Trojan War around the 13th–12th century BC. This chronology aligns with the collapse of Bronze Age civilizations in the Mediterranean. Second, the destruction. Troy Vieja shows evidence of sudden destruction by fire and warfare, with unburied human remains and weapon finds. Third, population evidence. The fortress shows signs of defense and resource limitations typical of a besieged city. This discovery proved that a Mycenaean-era city was destroyed at the same location as Troy in Homer's epic. The Trojan War was most likely a distorted and embellished oral memory of a real conflict that occurred during the Bronze Age transition. For credibility, we must turn to modern scientific analysis. Archaeologists like Manfred Kaufmann, who led post-Slimon excavations at Hisarlik, argue that Troy was a much larger and more important trading city than previously imagined. The most crucial scientific evidence comes from sources outside of Greece and Troy. In Anatolia, we have records from the Hittites, a major civilization east of Troy. Hittite documents from the 14th to 13th centuries BC often mention a region called Wailusa. Many scholars, including Joachim Latach, believe that Wailusa is the historical name for Troy, and there was a king named Alexandru of Wailusa, who might be the equivalent of Alexandros, another name for Paris. Hittite records also mention a powerful state called Ahiawa, widely believed to be the equivalent of Achaea, Homer's term for the Greeks. Hittite correspondence tells of disputes and conflicts between Wailusa and Ahiawa. By combining Homer's epic, the archaeological destruction of Troy via, and the political records from the Hittite Empire, we see a compelling picture. The Trojan War was not pure fiction, but an epic reflection of Bronze Age geopolitical conflict between Mycenaean Greece and Western Anatolia. The Trojan War was a battle won twice, once on the battlefield by Odysseus's deceit, and a second time in the realm of eternity by Homer's pen. This legend teaches us about hubris, fate, and the price of conflict. It reminds us that behind the stories of heroes and gods, there is always a harsh historical reality: burned cities, collapsed empires, and lost lives. Although we may never know the exact details of how Helen and Paris met, or how many soldiers hid inside the Trojan horse, we know this: Troy existed, a war happened, and its stories will live forever. What is the most fascinating part of the Trojan War for you? Write a comment and let's discuss this timeless historical puzzle. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more credible historical explorations. See you in the next video.